Well, and just like that, we're done. Well, done with the engine part anyway. Now time to stuff it back into the frame. Not a lot I can tell you here. You took it out, so you'll remember how to get it back in, right? I would say a key part of my plan is to have a jack underneath so that I can tilt the engine to get just the right angle so that the throttle body enters the air box and the back of the frame comes down right. Yeah, it's a little bit of a struggle to get everything to line up, and it'll go easier after your second or third or fourth engine, but the first one is going to be a pain in the butt. And I would say that the most difficult part is getting that throttle body on there so you're not pinching the throttle body boot or the rubber seal around it. And so just be real careful. It's going to take some time to kind of wiggle it in there. I'm going to put it on fast motion. It's just too much work to explain step to step. You just have to interpret from the fast motion. But yeah. Let's get this thing in here. I'm dying to get this project back on the road again. Okay, actually I'm going to stop the fast motion to explain what was going on there. So I've got the front of the engine on a jack and the back on a big piece of wood. That way I can vary the angle of it like I was talking about earlier. And then up here, I don't know how well it's going to show up in the video, but I was struggling to get the top of the throttle body in the boot right here. A lot of times what will happen is this boot will start getting jacked up, cocked to the side, hanging up. Right now I got it all where I want it, and on both sides. A lot of times what will happen is you'll get one side in, you're like, oh sweet, that was easy, and you go to the other side and it's all bound up in there and it's not correct. And so I finally was able to squeeze that in there with some rocking, rocking the engine around, varying the height of that jack, lowering the chain down until I got the front seated. And then, oops, I can grab my motor mount bolts, and these will start to line up. Oops. Just as soon as I drop it, maybe another millimeter or two. All right. So then, once I got those back bolts started and the throttle body is in there all good, then I can continue on, and I'll go back to fast motion. Okay, I'm not quite done, but I decided to stop it there, and the rest of the stuff's pretty easy, and you don't need to sit through it. A couple of pointers, though. Yeah, don't forget the passenger footrest here needs to go on before the exhaust. It's kind of integrated with the exhaust. I made sure that my oxygen sensor bung plugs are all cleaned up and in good shape. Got the belt all aligned. I like to move the ABS wire to the outside and zip tie it here. Makes getting the wheel on and off easier if you can take that sensor out and yeah, get it out of the way. Oh, pretty self-explanatory. I got the battery in there, got the negative still unhooked. Everything's all hooked up. Really all I got to do is, for some reason they still had a Victory air filter in here and it looks just destroyed. I'm going to put a Lloyd's air filter in there. Slip on the exhaust, put the tank on, fill it with oil and a filter. Don't forget that. You got to take that filter off to get the exhaust on and off. So I'll get that done, and then once it's full of oil, it's got an air filter, the tank is on there with some fresh gas in there. I'm going to air up the tires and we're going to crank it up and see what she does. So when you see me next here in a few seconds, I will have done that and we'll fire it up. And just like that, we're done. Or we're ready to fire it up anyway. Got the tank on, got the exhaust finished, just little bits and pieces here and there that needed to be done. Put oil in it, and I put extra oil in it. I filled it above the line because I know it's got to fill all the everything that's drained out, because we're completely bone dry inside here. When you do a normal oil change, not all the oil comes out. And same with the oil cooler, you know, I let it drain out. So extra oil in there. You notice that I didn't put it together either, like completely 100%. I got it together enough to run it. Everything on here will allow this to sit here and idle. And I'm not a very superstitious person, but that's just my superstition, is you don't put it all the way together. You test fire it first before you put all the extra crap on there. And that's where I'm at now. I'm going to test fire it, and we're just going to idle it and see if it idles and it all sounds good. I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, sweet, it's running, and start jamming on the throttle immediately. Like, oh yeah, it sounds great. You know, that's a terrible idea. What I'm doing is I'm just going to let it idle, and I'm going to let it get up to temp. If it'll idle well, which I think it will, we're just going to, you know, it'll take 5-10 minutes, something like that, I don't know, to get up to where the cylinders are warm. The whole time that it's running, I'm going to be walking around with my flashlight, you know, like looking for leaks and making sure that I got all the little last nuts and bolts in place. And I'm going to put a fan on it, let it kind of, what we're going to do, what that does is just, it's a test, of course, and then it's a heat cycle as well, and it's going to heat up the gasket material on those head and base gaskets and kind of melt it into place, and it's just a good test. And we don't need, if this was a stock bike or a bike that we had made no changes to the engine, then we don't need to make any sort of engine controller type of changes. And even with this big bore, it should idle without any sort of fuel controller. This one used to have a power commander on there. I removed that. I'm going to tune it with a Maximus. But right now it's just a stock computer. There's no Maximus tied to it yet. And that should be fine for idling. And then as soon as it goes through a heat cycle, I determine it's all good to go. Then I'm going to bring it over to the dyno, and then I'm going to load a map into it, and then I'll be able to put it in first gear and start running it through its gears and kind of start running in the engine. But that's later on. I haven't even fired the thing up yet, so let's see what happens. I haven't test fired this in advance for filming, so if it doesn't run, you're going to share the embarrassment with me. I guess. And I kind of wanted you to hear that it's going to be clattery. You know, we drained all the oil out. There's no oil pressure. It's got a gain pressure. All the tappets are going to be loose and chattering, and the cam chain. And it's god-awful for the first few seconds until it builds that oil pressure. And then it should settle right into a nice idle. So let's see what happens. Well, we got fuel pressure. I can hear the fuel pump moving. I'm gonna give it a little, just a tiny crack of throttle. So what you saw just there was the initial warm-up where I just got the engine idling on the stand, put a fan on it. You may have seen the smoke start to come off from the grease marks from your hands on the exhaust and the fan blowing the smoke away. And then I wanted to get it to a point where it was just uncomfortable to have my hand on it. We don't have to let it sit there for a half an hour and idle. We just wanted to get warm, and I did, and shut it down. And now we're on my dyno. And had this been a stock bike, then you could have put the bags and seat and everything on and just continued on running and test your new engine. But because this is a big bore, which some of you may attempt to be doing when you do your rebuild, I have the dyno as an integral part of the break-in process. So what I've done here is after the heat cycle, I drove it up onto the dyno, and then I plugged in my Maximus and I gave it a base map that I knew to be good. If this bike was using a power commander, then I would get a base map that I knew to be good. And plug in my aftermarket wideband oxygen sensors and call up the program and make sure that the bike is performing, or it has accurate, or the air fuel ratios are safe, is what I'm trying to say. And all that's happening on the dyno. So if you're at home, this is going to be more of a process. You may want to talk to the local dyno shop, even if they don't really specialize in victories. This is pretty easy, just to load up a program and read the air fuel. Maybe if you're doing it at home, you'd get a handheld meter and be working with your laptop and a power commander and making sure that it's got good air fuel ratio so it doesn't melt down your brand new motor by being too lean. And that's what I'm trying to achieve here, is making sure that it's safe, so that we can put break-in miles on it. And so once I got the base map into it, I started it up again, let it idle a little bit, get warm, and then I started kind of going through the motions of just running it through the gears, making sure that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are working, you know, that there's no weird noises. Air fuel is safe, especially at like highway speeds, because I'm not going to put a ton of miles on it on the dyno. I'd like to make sure that it's safe to ride around and then go ride it out on the street once I have the peace of mind of knowing with my sensors that it's safe and it's not going to be way too lean or way too rich. And then I like to get a minimum of 50 miles on them. There's a lot of braking that happens in the first 50 miles, and the map will absolutely change when I come back in 50 miles and I do the final tune on this thing. And yeah, that's my method. It's going to be a lot more difficult to be accurate when you're doing it at home, but if you're doing it at home, then I would get that handheld meter and familiarize yourself with the software. Make sure it's safe, get the 50 miles on it, and then have the dyno guy do the rest of it and dial it all in. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take, now that I've you know, got it all hooked up and got the base map in, I'm going to verify that it's all good on my computer and head out for some miles and come back and finish it all off. So I think that's the end of the video. It's up and running. I've tested it. Everything works great. And I'm going to break in the motor and send this thing back to Florida to a very happy customer where hopefully it'll live a long and happy life. I hope you got a bunch of information, man. This was a long video. It took a long time to get it right. So thanks for sticking around and watching. I appreciate it, and enjoy.